Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast for Monday, September the 9th. I'm Zach Ewing with Darcey and Koki Riley, two of our LSU beat writers here at The Advocate, and we're going to talk a little bit of LSU Nicholls State reaction, look ahead to the South Carolina game. We've got a full preview pod coming out on that later in the week, but we'll look ahead a little bit and just kind of take stock of where LSU's football team is 2 weeks in, and some questions that we've had answered, some questions we still have about this team. So we are going to get right into that. I want to let you know first that this episode is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you in 60 seconds with the rest of our show.
Fellas, it's clear why Caesar's brought us together. This is the ultimate quarterback roundtable.
I think I know why we're here.
What? Quarterback, high school, Oklahoma?
I thought that was a musical.
Garth, I think you're here because when people use Caesar's Sportsbook, they earn with Caesar's rewards. Things like celebrity chef dining, Vegas vacations, even tickets to your show.
This app is over the top. There's the idea.
Bet with Caesar's Sportsbook. Earn Caesar's rewards and see your favorite quarterback, Garth Brooks, in concert.
Hey, you can't throw like that.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me
All right, y'all. So the Tigers are now 1-1. They beat Nicholls State 44-21 on Saturday night in the home opener at Tiger Stadium. 100th season at Tiger Stadium opens with a win. But combined with the loss to USC out in Las Vegas and kind of a lackluster, especially in the first half against Nicholls, Reed, I still sense like some consternation out there in LSU fanhood.
I do too. I don't think LSU fans are totally happy with how the season started. And if I were an LSU fan, I'd probably be a little concerned going out of that Nicholls game, especially how it played out. The score was lopsided, but it was a close game about halfway through the third quarter, and really at the start of the second half, the only thing that separated LSU and Nicholls was that safety in the first quarter where Nicholls sailed the snap over the punter's head and it rolled into the back of the end zone. It would have been tied if not for that after the 67-yard touchdown run that Nicholls had at the start of the third by Colin Guggenheim. So, yeah, it was LSU couldn't run the ball again. You know, the offense didn't do a great job. We can get into that later in the show. Brian Kelly talked a lot about that today in his press conference. And then it couldn't stop the run either on defense. Nicholls ran the ball well in the first half. They put together two really long drives, I believe an 86-yard drive and a 75-yard drive. Just two long, methodical drives that LSU couldn't stop. They couldn't get off the field, and then they ended in touchdowns. So LSU did some things well. They improved some things upon last week, but overall it was just kind of a bit of a concerning performance against an FCS team, one that I really wasn't expecting to see.
Yeah, of course they didn't play at their best, but I think at the same time I don't want to take too much from any of these sort of weird FCS games, and we've seen so many times in the past a team that we think is really good or is dominant or is at least like a quality FBS side struggle somewhat against an FCS team, and then they're just fine for the rest of the year because these are weird games and weird scenarios early in the season. And you know, LSU had one less day of rest and they were banged up and guys were getting small injuries all over the place. Garrett Nussmeier at one point had cramps in his legs, and I think like the one time this sort of I guess this idea sort of came up with me was like, I remember when I was covering Arizona State, they played Sacramento State at home and they won by like they won like 19-13 or something. It was just an awful performance, really ugly game. And they went out and played Michigan State the next week and won. And it sort of teaches you that, all right, you don't want to put too, even though on paper it's very lopsided between the two sides, you don't want to put too much stock into a game like this, just from a pure performance standpoint. And the same goes for if they won by 60 points. You know, if they won by 60 points in this game, then you don't want to put too much in that either.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, after you lose the opener and you come home very visibly angry in the case of Brian Kelly and probably some of the players too, like you want to put that performance behind you and say, okay, let's turn the corner and let's take it out on Nicholls. But on the other hand, and I think our predictions, like I picked 62-7. That's exactly what I thought LSU would do. On the other hand, you're right, Koki. You have 1 day fewer rest. You're traveling back across the country. Played Sunday night, so you didn't get home until Monday morning. You know, you don't really start Nicholls prep until Tuesday. You've got guys banged up. You know, as much as we'd like to say, oh, how can you mess around with Nicholls, LSU? Like, first of all, Nicholls won their conference the last 2 years. This is not a bad team. You're not talking about a bad FCS team. Obviously, a physical skill disadvantage, but also LSU's players are human beings too. And to get off of that emotional high of the season opener and then having a day fewer rest, and it's just hard to get back up for a game. And you have your conference opener, which we'll talk about coming up. So it's a classic trap situation. Now, having said that, if you have an advantage over an FCS team, you would think it would be on the offensive and defensive lines. And in some cases, that's where LSU struggled. So like you use the term red flags, Reed. Like I don't want to, there are some built-in excuses, but I also think that there are some legitimate questions coming out of this game.
On offense, LSU ran the ball 21 times, and on those 21 carries, they got only 65 yards. They never really got a push, and that was a repeat of the USC game when there weren't really many holes for the running backs to run through. The offensive line didn't do a great job of push and creating separation along that line of scrimmage. So that was a repeat of USC because, you know, we entered the Nicholls game saying, hey, I want to see LSU run the ball. I want to see them establish that part of the offense and really get that going because you've got the physical advantages, the speed advantages to really open things up there. And we didn't see that. LSU struggled to run the ball. And Brian Kelly took some time today to mention that it was because mainly that Nicholls loaded the box to prevent the run, essentially. And Gary Nussmeier at the line of scrimmage when he's making his checks, a lot of the time he checked out of a run play and into a pass play because Nicholls gave them a favorable passing situation, whether they were playing man coverage on the outside or cover one or whatever. Nussmeier decided to change from a run play to a pass play, and that's the strategy they took because Nicholls was loading the box. So that can sort of explain the rushing struggles. But overall, if you look at the numbers, LSU ran the ball 21 times for 64 yards against an FCS opponent. That's it, point blank. You know, so that's the reality. That's the struggle, and we'll see if they can improve on that against South Carolina.
Yeah, and I think that definitely explains why they didn't run the ball as much as we thought they would, especially in the first half. But I don't know if it totally explains the 64 yards on 21 carries because 21 carries is still, you know, you're not totally getting away from the run, even if it isn't your focal point. And 64 yards is just not enough yards on that many carries when you're facing an FCS opponent. And it's not like they're giving up a lot of -3. Not like these runs are turning into -3 yards or -5 yards. These are just 1 yard or no yard runs. And I don't know. It's kind of puzzling as to why that's the case. I mean, we could sort of work out the theories today. Like I think that. Maybe it's because maybe it's because the backs aren't finding the holes very well, and it's a vision problem on their perspective. Because John Emery, who has very good vision, at least according to Brian Kelly, was one of the few running backs who had a really good day against USC, right? And he has really good vision, and maybe the other guys, maybe the holes were there for the other guys, and they just don't have that level of vision. Or maybe it's because the offensive linemen aren't getting up to the second level for whatever reason. And I've kind of noticed that with these two games, that the line isn't really getting up to the linebackers and opening up those holes. And I think if LSU really wants to fix their rushing game, they got to watch what the Lions did last night to the Rams. I know this is pro football, but what the Lions did, especially in overtime against the Rams, was textbook perfect how to run the football. And from scheme, toughness, execution, the right running backs with the right vision, all of it was perfect. And I'm not saying they're going to become the Detroit Lions next week.
Lions may have the best offensive line in the NFL.
Yes, but
LSU has a very good offensive line.
Exactly. We LSU's strength this season was supposed to be the offensive line. So like there is that similarities. I'm not saying that they should be the Detroit Lions. I'm not saying that they're going to be the Detroit Lions. But I'm just telling you, like, if you want to see what a good rushing attack looks like, watch that.
But you are saying we could all use a little more Dan Campbell ethos in our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Brian Kelly has
Yeah.
Brian Kelly has a little Dan Campbell in him in terms of just the aggressiveness on fourth down. I mean, they went for those 2 fourth downs last week against USC, and I thought they were both really good decisions.
Yeah.
The other part of this too is on the other side of the ball, if you can't successfully run the ball and control time of possession, it puts your defense at more risk. And that's the other concern I have. You mentioned Colin Guggenheim's long run. It's one thing to give up a big play like we say, oh, FCS team, it doesn't matter. They still have good players. If you bust an assignment or somebody falls down or something happens, like they're still going to hit big plays. Almost more concerning to me is the long drives. Like, how did you not find a way to get a negative play? And we talk about wrecking some havoc and what Blake Baker wants to do with this defense. And when you're letting Nicholls State go on a 10, 12, 14 play touchdown drive, that means that there's two things. There's EPA per play, which is like how explosive you are, and then there's success rate, which is how many plays did you get. I think it's like 50% of the yards on first down. I can't remember the exact percentages. 75% on second down, and then getting a first down on third down is how you define a successful play. If Nicholls is having a high success rate against your defense, how many teams are you really stopping in SEC play?
Yeah, exactly. And LSU's pass rush was never really going to be a factor in this game because of Nicholls' game plan. Nicholls committed to running the ball, and they really stuck to it. They ran the ball a lot. And when they didn't run the ball, they usually did some sort of RPO or quick pass type of action, right? And that doesn't give the chance for the pass rush to get home. So LSU was never going to have a pass rush, but on the other hand, its run defense did not really show up either. I believe Nicholls ran the ball 38 times. If it wasn't 38, it was 35 plus times. And of those times, LSU stopped them for a loss behind the line of scrimmage only one time, and it was on Nicholls' very first drive. I think if you're a team like LSU and you've got the size and the talent advantage and the physicality advantage, you should stop a few more of those runs behind the line. And that's what they didn't do. Every run that Nicholls had was positive, and that's how you build those long, methodical, slow-moving drives. You just get 4, 3, 5 yards at a time, and then you hit the defense with the pass play. So I was just surprised that LSU's defense wasn't more disruptive in the run game, and I think that's why the game was so close for as long as it was.
Yeah, especially early on, and they finished the game with 2 tackles for loss. Run or pass doesn't matter, just simply 2 tackles for loss.
One of them was Braden Swinson for a little touch pass on a jet sweep. Technically a run, technically a pass, but Braden Swinson had the other one.
So
if you're gonna really wreck the havoc that Blake Baker talks about all the time, you have to have some 3rd and 12s in there and 2nd and 15s, and where your pass rush can get going and where you can kind of take some risks. And that just never happened. So it's just still question marks as we continue on the LSU Sports Insider podcast. Want to let you know that we are on YouTube, the LSU Sports at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Subscribe to that channel for all of our videos. You get alerts. You can sign up for alerts whenever we have a new podcast, but also practice videos, interview videos, the whole bit. Going to do some post-game shows as the season goes on as well. So encourage you to do that. That's LSU Sports at NOLA.com. You can also, the YouTube channel, you can also subscribe to The Advocate. Click on any of our LSU stories. If you hit the paywall, you subscribe. That lets our editors know that you're interested in LSU content, and that's why you subscribed. So go ahead and do that. If you hit the paywall, we've got a special deal right now. It's $1 for 6 months. It'll get you all the way through football season. You'll get all the LSU coverage, Saints coverage, prep football, even most of the first half of the Pelican season, 6 months. I mean, you can get a lot of stuff. LSU basketball, in the next 6 months, and then decide if you like it, you want to pay the full price after that. We'd appreciate you trying. Today's show is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care specialist services or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. Before we close the book on Nicholls, let's name our player of the game, guys. Our star player segment is proudly sponsored by Waste Pro. Ensure your tailgate or event is a hit with clean and convenient portable toilets from Waste Pro. Rent yours today. And could have gone a lot of different directions here. I think we discussed a few names. Ultimately went Kyren Lacy. I like this because he probably deserved it, at least for the first half against USC as well. But then he has a 5-catch game, not anything spectacular, but 3 of them were touchdowns, Koki.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and I think in the first 2 games, he's pretty much proven that he's the number 1 receiver for this team, and deservedly so. And I think what Nick Saban said, I think on game day in week 1, he was like, it's Louisiana, like wide receivers come out of trees there, and Kyren Lacy, a Louisiana born and bred receiver, and his route to becoming the number 1 guy is a lot more, I guess, circuitous than a lot of these other top receivers who are high 4 or 5-star recruits who came in LSU from day 1 and worked their way up, or even a guy like Justin Jefferson who, yes, he was like a 2-star guy coming in, but he still was at LSU from day 1. Kyren Lacy's a transfer from UL, and he's in his 5th season of college football right now. So it's his journey to getting here has been a very interesting one, because I remember when they first got him in the transfer, I thought it was interesting that they even were open to bringing in a receiver, because that was already one of their deeper positions on the team. So that decision certainly paid off, because he's their number 1 guy right now.
I like his aggressiveness in trying to jump into the end zone, hurdle a defender. I like that mentality, but no need to subject yourself to that kind of injury in a game like this. He was down for a while. He looked to be okay. Like the wind got knocked out of him real quick. But yeah, it was a great game for him. LSU did a good job of putting him in space and getting him involved throughout the game, not just in the first 2 quarters. So that was an improvement upon USC. He was very involved. Garrett Nussmeier found him early and found him often.
Yep. And so encouraging, I think, to see. We talk about a lot of the question marks, but LSU appears to have a true number 1 wide receiver, even without Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, who played in their first NFL games yesterday. So on that note, though, on the note of Kyren Lacy kind of getting banged up, thankfully okay, today's injury report, which is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic. More bad news. Jacoby and Guillory out for the season, torn Achilles.
Yeah, and Guillory only played 6 snaps against Nicholls, and when he came out of the game, the run defense wasn't quite as good. So it's definitely, you could definitely argue that it's going to be a question mark in terms of how they fill that spot and find that guy who can be the focal point of their run defense, especially in the interior. But at the same time, Brian Kelly seemed pretty optimistic in terms of how they're going to replace this today. Sean Washington, who he said was on the scout team, and we were at practices. Sean Washington really wasn't part of the main rotation during preseason practices.
He was on the 3rd team.
He was pretty much on the third team, his scout team guy, and he came in because of the Guillory injury. He wasn't even expected to play against Nicholls, and Kelly thought he played really well, to the point where he's probably going to be the first guy he's probably going to be the guy who takes like a chunk of those snaps that they're going to have to replace with Guillory out now. So you could potentially see him starting. You're definitely going to see him for, 15, 20, maybe even more snaps at that D tackle spot, because of he brings my guess is that he brings a similar profile to Guillory, and just being like a run stopper, really strong, technically sound sort of guy. Because if you look at their other D tackles, they're either small or they're better pass rushers. So I could certainly see them rotating him in. And then after that, Kelly talked about how they're probably going to have to get a little bit creative in terms of filling in the rest of those empty snaps. Either that's moving an edge rusher to defensive tackle. Paris Shan seems like an obvious name for that, or moving up Don McKinley, who was a 5-star recruit, guy. A lot of LSU fans were very very hopeful for, at least in the future. During preseason, he was very quiet, barely, again, was more of a scout team guy, and is still, it seems like he is a scout team guy at the moment. But, you know, he's the high ceiling guy. You can see what you get from a very talented defensive tackle. So we'll see.
Zach, it sounds like they're going to. It's not going to be one guy who takes all those snaps that Guillory would have had. It's going to be more of a committee type approach at that position. We haven't mentioned Ahmad Bro, a freshman who they really like. He could slot in as well. JVR Suggs, the transfer from Grand Valley State, he could get some of those snaps as well. So it's going to be a team approach to sort of fill in that void. And just real quick on Guillory, like he's a fifth-year senior. It's real. You can't help but feel for the guy. He's been at LSU this whole time. He's waited his turn behind a lot of talented defensive tackles. And Brian Kelly said, going back to the spring, that he really took advantage of the opportunity that he had. Because if you remember, it was kind of a surprise that both Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo left for the draft. And then LSU kind of struggled in the transfer portal to really plug in that gap that they left. And so that meant Jacoby and Guillory had to step up, and he did. And he had a really impressive spring. He had a really impressive fall camp. And LSU was really proud of the way that he stepped into that void, and he was playing really well. He played really well against USC. So it's just a shame to see him go down like that. Brian Kelly said he might take a medical red shirt, come back next year. But again, for a guy who waited his turn, waited 4 years in order to get that opportunity and then earn that opportunity, for it to get taken away like that is pretty sad.
Yeah, I mean, both guys, and we sat here and knocked on wood throughout training camp and said, oh, the LSU doesn't have any major injuries. Now 2 weeks, 2 guys out for the season. And similar to what you're talking about with Guillory, John Emery, like a guy who's waited his turn and has been through these things before, and now he's out. So you hope it's not a trend, man. You feel for those guys. But Koki, you were talking about some of the depth.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because Brian Kelly is talking up the depth, and that's his job. Like, he's not going to sit here and say, oh, no, guys, we're screwed. We lost Guillory. You know, like that's just not what any coach is ever going to say. It's not his job. It's not. But we're talking about a defensive line that has struggled at times already. As Reed mentioned, they were not able to adequately replace Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo in the transfer portal, at least not the guys that they were going after. So they rely on Guillory to step up. It's great that he did, but now he's out. Like, at what point does this depth become a concern for a unit that already was maybe underperformed?
It is a bit of a concern. How can it not be, right? I mean, he was probably their best defensive tackle, like bar none. I think Gio Pies has done a nice job at that other D tackle spot, and I think it should be noted with this defensive tackle unit. Again, they didn't have the greatest game against Nicholls, obviously, but they held. I mean, USC only ran the ball, had 3 yards per rush, and ran for 60 some odd yards just 2 weeks ago, and that's a team that I thought was going to be able to run the ball on LSU because of Woody Marks and just the way they were going to be able to spread things out and lighten the boxes and all that sort of stuff. So like that has to be. I mean, a lot of it had to do with Guillory. So it's going to be interesting to see how they sort of piece this thing together. And I think Washington is the closest thing they have to a one-to-one replacement just in terms of play style. But if Suggs and Bro are going to play more, they're going to have to play a different style on the defensive line. That doesn't just mean relying on someone like Savion Jones or Parashan more in the run. It also getting lighter and smaller defensive tackle means you're going to have to change the style of play at that spot. It means you're going to have to. It means you might even be more aggressive in terms of getting after the passer because Bro's a smaller guy. He's an edge rusher who added 30-40 pounds to play defensive tackle, and he's still small at defensive tackle. And then Suggs is known for his quickness and his potential as a pass rusher. So those guys, they're going to need to tailor the defense to those guys, and that's something that Kelly talked about again today. So again, it's going to be very interesting to see how they sort of cobble this thing together and what Sean Washington can give them, because they need somebody who can give them some I guess some muscle and some meat on the inside regardless.
Yeah, and none of these guys were like low-rated recruits. They all have it in them. We just got to see it get coached up before. So it's another obstacle. Let's turn the page a little bit. We'll talk about LSU in South Carolina. Again, we'll have a full preview podcast. Normally, we come out with those on Thursday. This one may come out on Wednesday just so we can stay ahead of Hurricane. Is it Francine? Is that what
Francine, and she's a tropical storm
She's
right
tropical
now.
storm right now. They think she'll be a hurricane, so we may record early
Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
Why are hurricanes always girls? I'm just curious.
They're not.
They're not.
Hurricane Andrew?
Oh, it's true.
Just depends.
What am I
Gustav.
thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just seems like lately the bad ones have all been.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but yeah, this is Hurricane Francine. Anyway, we may have that Wednesday a full preview pod, but just kind of starting to turn the corner to South Carolina. This is, I think after the USC loss, a lot of us were probably guilty of saying, oh, well, we're not going to learn anything else till the Ole Miss game because LSU has 4 very easily winnable games coming up. And LSU is favored. We're going to talk to Thomas Casale about sports betting here in a minute. They're 7-point favorites. I mean, clearly are expected to win this game. But South Carolina absolutely drummed Kentucky in Lexington last week. Kind of opened some eyes around the SEC and said, you got to, it's the age-old thing. You can't, I don't care if South Carolina might only be the 9th best team in the SEC or 11th best team or whatever they are. They're still really good, and if you don't play well, especially in Columbia, and now we find out College Game Day is coming to Columbia, so the fans are going to be geeked up for it. I was a little surprised to see they're coming to Columbia, but they are.
It's not a great week.
It's not a great week. You have a couple other games between 2-0 teams, Alabama, Wisconsin, I think.
Yeah.
Boston College, Missouri, but it's a conference game. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be a game South Carolina is going to look at as a really big game, and so you'd better be ready for their best effort.
And we're talking about run defense. South Carolina is tied for the lead in the SEC in rush attempts so far through the first 2 weeks of the season. So they will run the ball, and they will test LSU's run defense, and that's going to be their bread and butter. And so LSU is going to have to prove themselves against one of the top rushing teams in the SEC. They haven't been super efficient so far, but they have shown that they are committed to the run, and I don't think that they're going to see LSU as this super daunting sort of run defense. I think they're going to definitely try to run the ball a lot in the game.
But to take a slightly more optimistic turn on this, I think if LSU packs the box, which is what they should do in this game, because I think South Carolina is going to have a lot of trouble throwing the ball because they've had a lot of trouble throwing the ball really in these first 2 weeks. I know they destroyed Kentucky, but a lot of that had to do with just Kentucky's pure incompetence on offense. Like Kentucky was 3 of 10. I think Vandegrift was 3 of 10 in the air, and then he got
33 yards
for
or
33
something,
yards or something, and he got benched. And it was just like Kentucky's offensive line was just simply not an SEC line by any. But anyway, that's kind of. But we're talking about the other side of the ball now. But like when South Carolina has the ball, I just feel like they should at least force Sellers to beat them through the air. And I mean, LSU has the athletes to pack the box and stop the run just through that. And it's the games where, teams can spread it out and you make sure you get maybe a double team on Trey Harris when you're facing Ole Miss. That's when, the run game becomes kind of worrying, right? Mm-hmm. Run defense becomes more worrying. So I think that if they can, pack those boxes maybe the same way Nicholls did to them, it could make stopping the run easier, and you're also sort of pushing on South Carolina's perceived weakness.
Yeah, I mean that game script in Lexington worked out very well for South Carolina. They got out to a lead, their defense gave them a lead, and at that point you can run the ball, and they're obviously very effective at doing that, and you have to be careful of that if you're LSU. But the week before against Old Dominion, when they were trailing in that game, they struggled quite a bit and needed a late takeaway, I think, to beat Old Dominion. And so this is a team, I think, if you can get out to a lead against them, and again, we'll talk in depth with Wilson and Scott Rabelais on Wednesday about this, but like if you can get out to a lead against them, you might be in pretty good shape, even on the road, take the crowd out of it. But it's an SEC game. It's a road SEC game. College Game Day is going to be in town. I mean, like you got to be prepared for a battle.
South Carolina's defense, I think that's gonna be a fascinating matchup because their defenses looked really good, really athletic. They got a lot of athletes, especially on the edge. Dylan Stewart, that was a name that was bandied around at the press conference quite a bit today. He's a freshman edge rusher, 5-star recruit, and that's a guy. It's gonna be interesting if they can get away with just putting Will Campbell on him. Then that's gonna make things a lot easier for LSU's offense. But if Campbell has any sort of trouble, or Emory Jones any sort of trouble with any of their pass rushers on the edge, then that definitely changes the math a little bit. Then you have to maybe keep Mason Taylor or one of the running backs in to help chip block, and now you're really leaning on your receivers a little bit more. You're leaning on the running game more, which has struggled for them so far. So I mean, it's going to be all about staying in front of the sticks. In terms of obviously, it's always about staying in front of the sticks and running the ball when it comes to tampering down a pass rush, right? But it also comes down to the performance of their tackles. Like, I'm not saying, Will Campbell and Emory Jones are getting paid NAL dollars, but this is why they're getting paid NAL dollars for games like this. So it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. All right. As I mentioned, South Carolina is a 7-point home underdog in this game, and that brings us to the sports betting segment. The Queen of Baton Rouge proudly sponsors the LSU Sports Insiders sports betting segment with Thomas Casale. Experience the thrill of game day at 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, your premier destination for elevated sports entertainment. Thomas has an early lean for LSU -7 in this game. Let's hear what he has to say.
Thanks, guys. Well, LSU begins SEC play this weekend against South Carolina. Interesting, this number has changed from the look-ahead line. LSU was -9 last week, but after South Carolina upset Kentucky as a 10-point underdog, the Tigers are now -7 with an over-under of 51.5. I look at this game. South Carolina's 2-0. They upset Kentucky, but that's a weird game. I mean, their offense did very little. They got a pick 6. They still can't throw the football. I don't think South Carolina's offense can bother LSU's defense, which is still a question mark going into the season. Brian Kelly's done a good job of beating those middle-of-the-road SEC teams on the road. I think this is a good spot for LSU. I'm not worried about them sleepwalking in the first half against Nicholls State. They're coming off a huge game against USC. I think LSU gets right here. I like the value at 7, and I also lean to the under here. South Carolina's offense has shown nothing in the first 2 games. This looks to me like a 31-13 LSU win. I think they make a statement on the road. So my early leans on this game are LSU -7 and under 51.5.
All right. That's thank you, Thomas. So Thomas leaning toward LSU and the under in this game. I don't know. It's interesting because home underdogs are always kind of trendy picks, but it does feel like this is a game, maybe it could be a get-right game for LSU. You guys won't be on Wednesday's pod to pick it, so are you both leaning LSU at this point?
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with picking LSU, and I think my main reasoning is for honestly, my reasoning's for pretty much everything I just said in the last segment that we had. So I'm not convinced with South Carolina. I know they just destroyed Kentucky. I was more disappointed in Kentucky than I was in anything else coming out of that game. So I just want to see them throw the ball throw consistently well when it comes to South Carolina. Until I see that, I have trouble picking them in this game.
I'll say LSU covers because I believe in its passing game, and I believe in Garrett Nussmeier, who we might talk about later. They've been really good, and so I think that's enough to beat South Carolina.
Yeah, I think we are going to talk about Garrett Nussmeier later. So let's take our last break, and when we come back, we're going to talk sort of some overarching 2 weeks in, what questions have been answered by LSU, what questions do we still have, and then we're also going to go around the SEC. But first, this quick word from our sponsors.
Since 1988, Classic Industrial Services, Inc. has led the industry in specialty contracting. From thermal insulation to scaffolding, coatings, and beyond, we cover it all. Every minute matters in our commitment to quality and safety. We're here to serve with roofing, siding, heat trace, and refractory services. Visit ClassicIndustrial.com for more information.
Tiger fans, you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails. With top-notch screens and live betting, it's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams and enjoy a cold brew or signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge and your go-to for game day or any day. Visit today and elevate your sports watching experience. Okay, so we're going to go into a little segment we do every now and then we like to call the grocery list. And the grocery list is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And the grocery list is basically taking a look at LSU's team. And we ask the question, what item on the list have they checked off for you? What question has been answered so far through 2 weeks? And what still needs to be checked off? What's still on that list that you don't think you've seen enough to check off yet, Koki?
In terms of what they've checked off, it's Garrett Nussmeier and the fact that they have pretty much properly replaced a Heisman-winning quarterback with another quarterback who, if the season goes a little bit better from here and a couple other things happen, it could be a Heisman contender because the way he's able, I've just been very impressed with how comfortable he's been in the pocket, how he's manipulated defenses, understood defenses, how accurate he's been. I really did not expect him to be this accurate. I thought he was a fairly accurate quarterback who could definitely, stretch the field and make plays downfield. But it's been his precision and the underneath stuff and understanding coverages and defenses and having the correct chemistry with his receivers, like all that stuff combined, all these like small things that have really, really impressed me.
And I think you agreed with that your item checked off.
I did. I checked off. It was more specific. It was like the explosive / vertical passing game. We didn't see that very much against USC. We did see it against Nicholls. So I was impressed by that, by how in command Garrett Nussmeier looked against Nicholls, and the vertical passing game was really clicking. It was working really well, and it allowed LSU to sort of get a comfortable lead. So yeah, that was super impressive. Garrett Nussmeier threw 6 touchdowns against Nicholls, and we didn't really talk about it. We didn't bring it up. It's almost like we're sort of taking him for granted and taking LSU's quarterback play for granted right now. So he's I believe he leads the country in touchdown passes.
Yeah.
He's right up there in passing yards, and I believe, I might be getting this wrong, but there's only been 3 quarterbacks to throw at least 6 touchdowns in a game. 3 LSU quarterbacks to throw about 6 touchdowns in the game, and I think it's about that same number who've started their career with 3 straight 300-yard passing games, something like that. He's putting up really impressive numbers, historically significant numbers through the first 3 starts of his career, and it's been super impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think when you're this close to the LSU program and LSU fans follow the Tigers, obviously, like, you'd maybe take it for granted, but around the country, this was a pretty big question mark. I mean, LSU struggled for a season to replace Joe Burrow before they found Jaden Daniels, and then, okay, they got to replace Jaden Daniels, and around, if you follow the program every day, Nuss has got it. Nuss is really good. Well, a lot of people had some legitimate questions as to whether he could follow, and it's only been two weeks. But if you add that to his performance in the bowl game against Wisconsin, and even going back to the SEC championship game 2 years ago, like, this guy's answered the questions. If he's not a star quarterback or the best quarterback in the SEC, he's at least answered the questions to say he's going to help you win some games.
People were optimistic or were relatively optimistic in terms of some of the other quarterback question marks compared to the rest of the country. But once you see it like this, and you see and you look at the specific things that he has, I guess, improved on even from last year and especially 2 years ago, there's really not a lot you can pick on with the guy because, again, he's been deadly accurate, and his just ability to read defense has just been so impressive to me.
There's a lot of programs around the country, around the SEC, even proud programs.
Yeah,
Auburn, Texas A&M, Florida. Florida had Anthony Richardson.
Well, we'll see. Yeah,
they've had they haven't had a single quarterback as good as Garrett Nussmeier in years. And this is LSU. Oh yeah, we're losing the Heisman winner for the second time in 5 years. Well, here comes Garrett Nussmeier. And by the way, they've got the #1 recruit in the country coming down the pipe at quarterback too. So things look really good there. Now, on the other hand, things on your grocery list that you wanted to see LSU answer that they have not checked off, Reed, in the first 2 weeks?
I'm looking on the shelves. I'm getting on my tippy toes. I'm asking a store employee, where's the run game? I want to see the run game. It didn't show up against USC. It didn't show up against Nicholls. We haven't seen it yet. It's a big surprise given the talent they have on the offensive line and given the talent they have at running back, that it hasn't shown up yet. And if you ask Brian Kelly why hasn't it shown up yet, he'll say it's because both USC and Nicholls loaded up their boxes and did focus all of their energy on stopping the run. And so Garrett Nussmeier would check out of runs that they called into passes because they were presented with favorable passing situations. And he would say that, hey, take those extra players out of the box, go with the 3-man front, and then we'll run the ball, and then we'll really control the game like that. Then we'll get an opportunity to run the ball, and we'll show you what we can do. So maybe LSU hasn't really gotten the chance to really establish its run game. Maybe its run game isn't that good. I don't think we'll know yet. We could find out more this week, but that's one thing I'll be looking for as well.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's less of a question mark and more of something that I think hasn't been quite unlocked yet that I want to see unlocked. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's Harold Perkins on defense. I don't think Harold Perkins has been necessarily terrible to start this season. But really outside of the one play he made early in the USC game where he got in the backfield and basically single-handedly prevented that third and short from being converted, he's kind of been like non-existent a little bit in terms of quiet.
It's fair to have high expectations for the guy, right?
Yeah.
He was an absolute star as a freshman.
He looked great in preseason too, and seemed like he was more comfortable as a middle linebacker. And Kelly had interesting comments about how they need to, shrink his vision at that spot in terms of there's so many things there's so many things that are going on when you're playing in that middle linebacker spot that you probably have to pay attention to. But they just want to they want to narrow his focus as a linebacker, and that certainly makes sense. And but you didn't really see that pay off against Nicholls, and I don't think this is this isn't their most pressing issue at the moment. But at the same time, it's something that if you want to create havoc on this defense, it starts with getting Harold Perkins more involved.
So we shall see. That is our grocery list. Tiger Fans Associated Grocers is hiring. Join a team committed to the success of independent retail grocers. Apply today at Associated Grocers and be part of something great. Okay, going to wrap it up for this Monday podcast on the LSU Sports Insider with a little Around the SEC. And Around the SEC is brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. And in the SEC, as we know, it just means more. Unless you're Mississippi State and you're going to Tempe, and then apparently the first half didn't matter. I don't know, Koki.
This is the only game we should be talking about.
I'm giving you the opportunity to brag on your Sun Devils
Arizona
here.
State, my Arizona State, the college that I attended to for 4 years and covered for 3, they beat Mississippi State. First time they'd ever beaten an SEC team ever, and they did it in Tempe. And the Kennedy Dillingham year 2 off to a 2-0 start. Cam Scattaboo 265 rushing yards against an SEC team, which is incredibly impressive. And and they got a big game this week at Texas State, and Texas State's a
big game at Texas State.
They're a good Group of 5 team. They might make the playoff if things go right for Texas State. Like I'm not kidding. Like they're a really good team,
What's
and that's on the road.
Name? Arizona State, Sparky, is that right?
Yeah, the Sun Devils. The Sparky,
the Sun Devil put a cookie on his fork. They finally beat an SEC team. Congratulations. We're happy for ASU. Around the rest of the SEC, Reed, what did you notice?
All right, so now let's talk about some serious football programs.
Man.
So Texas went to Michigan and won really decisively.
Just dominated them.
Yeah, so Michigan is not the powerhouse that they were last year. That's pretty apparent through 2 weeks, but it's still super impressive to go on the road in that environment and to win that decisively. It just showed me that Texas is legit. It's for real, and it's probably going to make the playoff.
And Texas, Georgia in 2 weeks? Is that right?
I think so.
2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, in Austin.
Incredible.
So that's going to be phenomenal. Probably number 1 against number 2. By the way, Koki, you're an AP poll voter. 6 of the top 7 in the AP poll this week are SEC teams. You got Tennessee went way up, and they looked very good against NC State. They rose like 8 spots in the poll. They're now number 7 in the country.
Yeah, I mean, you had to put Tennessee in your top 10 part. It's because Notre Dame lost and Oregon continues to struggle. But also, I mean, Tennessee beat an NC State team that was, if not in the top 25, near my top 25. And that was a team that we thought could maybe contend if things went right for the ACC. But when you lose 51-10, now it's not looking so great for them. But for But for Tennessee's sake, like, geez, like they ran the ball really well and they played really good defense, which is two things you don't really associate with Tennessee football these days. But that's what they did, and that's why they won so. That's why they won by so much in this game.
Yeah, it's an interesting year because, as I said, 6 of the top 7. It's Georgia number 1, Texas number 2. Is it Ohio State's 3rd? That's the one non-SEC team. Then it's Alabama 4th and Ole Miss 5th, or do I have that back?
Something like that.
And then
yeah.
I think Missouri 6th, Tennessee 7th. So 6 of the top 7 are SEC teams, and then there's like this gap. And
Yeah.
I guess you'd say I think Oklahoma is either ranked or they're close. They're
Oklahoma
and
LSU are ranked.
Oklahoma and LSU are
that's
ranked,
it.
and then Texas A&M, they lost to Notre Dame, who lost to Northern Illinois, so they're not going to be ranked. But we think that they're still good enough to beat some teams, and then you kind of have.
I had them ranked. I don't understand why we don't have them ranked.
Then you have another gap to sort of everybody else. Your South Carolinas and Auburns and Floridas and Kentuckys and Arkansas. Arkansas almost beat Oklahoma State, but Mississippi State, like these teams who we don't think are contenders. So there seem to be kind of these tiers this year, and LSU may be the one team. Like, do they belong in that top tier? Do they belong in a tier down? But it's an interesting year.
There's a lot of time to figure that out, and I will say though, like I do want to mention the Arkansas Oklahoma State thing because that game was insane.
Oh yeah, both teams tried to lose that game, man.
But I thought Arkansas, like, as much as they disappointed me in that game, they also really impressed me in that game because Taylon Green was doing stuff that he looked like a Sunday player at times at quarterback for them. And if he's going to make plays like that, then I think Arkansas' ceiling is a lot higher than we thought heading into the season because the defense is decent.
They at least look like they're not going to be the easy out they were at times last year. They're going to give you a game even if you're one of the top teams. Reed, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the SEC is really good this year, especially. I mean, it's a gauntlet. I don't know. I'm not sure what else to say. Lots of good teams are going to be fighting for those playoff spots, and it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. And if you're an LSU fan, LSU plays Ole Miss and Alabama. So win those games, and you can be a part of that conversation in that upper tier. Lose those games, and you're going to be a step behind, just like they have been the last 4 years.
And the thing is with the SEC this year, it hasn't always been perfect though in terms of the wins and losses. I mean, LSU loses to the USC, Texas A&M loses to Notre Dame, so it hasn't always been perfect. But there's so much depth within the conference,
right?
And then Texas kills Michigan that. Now
Georgia kills Clemson,
and Georgia kills Clemson, and now all of a sudden they're still 6 of the top 7 teams despite some of those other losses.
Yeah, and that's why I say there's a little bit of a soft underbelly this year. Like Auburn losing to Cal, it's not a good loss.
The quarterback situation, Peyton Thorne.
Florida was just crushed by Miami.
Yeah.
Kentucky looked awful. I mean, Mississippi State, like, not that Arizona State's a bad team, but we don't think Mississippi State is going to be.
No.
There are some teams in the SEC that look, it's a little bit of a soft underbelly, but. Even Vandy beats Virginia Tech. Arkansas takes Oklahoma State toe-to-toe. I mean, like, there's also nobody you can take for granted. And that may be as good a place as any to end because that'll set us up for LSU, South Carolina, where, again, kind of before the year, you circle it as saying, well, LSU's got a tough opener against USC. Then they should win these 4, no problem, before Ole Miss comes to town. Not so fast. South Carolina showed something against Kentucky. It's a road game. We'll see. We're going to break it all down in Wednesday's podcast. I want to let you know before we go that today's episode of the LSU Sports Insider was brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, proudly serving Louisiana and the entire United States. They got just about anything you can want from a construction company: metal siding and roofing, steam and electric tracing systems, thermal insulation services, industrial and commercial coatings, general maintenance services, large capital projects, commercial projects, small quick response private projects. Classic Industrial is your go-to for quality and safety. They're not just about business. They're a proud community partner supporting local initiatives and helping build a stronger Baton Rouge. At Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Today's episode also brought to you by Waste Pro. Keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. So that's our show for today. We'll be back Wednesday. Might even delay it and air it Thursday just because a lot of people may be, hopefully nobody's out of power, but you just never know with these storms. So stay safe out there. Good luck with the storm. And then we will talk to you with our LSU South Carolina preview later in the week. For Koki Riley and Reed Darcey, Amelia Cotton is our expert behind the glass. I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll see you next time.